Bueno, muy buenos días, estimadas, estimados participantes y panelistas.
Well,
Mi
good
nombre
morning, dear members. My name is Hong Pinson. I am the regional specialist for the UNICEF office. We are going to be moderating this event. It's called Guaranteeing the Right of Education for Refugees and Migrants from Venezuela. Before we begin, I would like to make
Contamos con traducción simultánea para español, inglés y portugués. En el Zoom deberían de ver un pequeño mundito abajo para poder seleccionar su traducción simultánea. No se preocupen. Debido a la agenda cargada que tenemos el día de hoy, no tendremos tiempo para preguntas y respuestas, pero cualquier consulta que ustedes tengan para los panelistas, les solicitamos amablemente lo puedan colocar en el chat, especificando hacia quién va dirigida y su contacto para hacerle llegar la respuesta cuanto antes. Bueno, este evento está desarrollado en el marco de la conferencia
takes
internacional.
place within the framework of the. This has been organized by the government of Canada within the. Well, thank you. I would like to thank the government of Canada for giving us the opportunity to give us this space for thought. This parallel event has been led by the Group of Education for Latin America and the Caribbean, led by UNICEF and Save the Children. I would like to take this chance to thank all the colleagues for their big support in the preparation of this event. Without further ado, I will give the floor to the Director of UNICEF from Latin America and the Caribbean, Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, for her welcoming words. Dear Jim, please go ahead. Well, good morning, dear representatives from the Government of Canada and representatives from other governments that are with us this morning. Esteemed Victoria, Regional Director of Save the Children, esteemed colleagues, members of the panel, and dear guests, good morning to you all. It is a true honor for me to open this virtual event that focuses on the need of such an important sector as education. The fact that UNICEF and Save the Children, we led together within the regional group of education in close alliance with other members of this group. Education is hope, is progress, and is future. That's how I lived it myself when, as a child, I walked to my school. However, as of now, in Latin America,
aproximadamente 124 millones de niños y niñas y adolescentes aún afectados por el cierre parcial de las escuelas por la pandemia del COVID-19. Con un promedio de 160
with an average of 166 days of in-person classes since March 2020. That's been the biggest challenge. As COVID extends in the region, schools have been closed all the way from preschool, elementary school, and high school. More than 159 million children have been affected. This accounts for more than 97% of students. In this troublesome scenario, refugees and migrants from Venezuela have been specifically affected. For instance, in Peru, the national platform estimates that towards the end of August 2020, more than 50% of boys and girls who are refugees remained outside the educational system, while in Colombia, the platform has said that 1 out of every 5 kids from Venezuela do not have access or does not have access to formal education during the COVID pandemic. So this situation happens all over the country. The situation is similar to other countries, and this is unacceptable for a boy or girl who are migrants. Going to the school is not only going to a place where they learn, it's also going to a place where they can play, make friends with kids from other countries, a place where they feel protected, where we break discrimination. In Latin America and the Caribbean, there is this big need to reopen the schools because of safety. but also to include boys and girls and adolescents, refugees and migrants in the different public policies, and also those who do not have any legal documents. This situation has become one of the main obstacles to gain access to education in these countries. In some cases, boys and girls can attend schools, but without the possibility of having their grades certified because of the lack of cooperation in this regard. Among the reasons for which Venezuelan boys and girls do not attend schools, we see the lack of economic resources of the migrants, the lack of access to IT devices, internet connectivity, discrimination, xenophobia, and lack of orientation. The longer these kids wait and remain outside Venezuela, the less chances they're going to have. We calculate that more than 3 million boys and girls may definitely drop out from school because of the pandemic. Leaving boys and girls, Venezuelan migrants outside schools would mean to expose them to the risks of exploitation, abuse, but also to be involved in crime networks. That's not good, neither for them nor for their country, the countries that receive them. Now, education of the migrant population, beyond personal learning, is one of the keys in order to guarantee inclusion, integration, and stability for the whole region. With a low investment, along with the international community, all of us together, we may back the efforts of the different countries in order to come up with these benefits for all boys and girls. We count on your support. Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Victoria Moore, Regional Director of Save the Children International. Thank you. Well, thank you, Jean. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for painting this image on the needs that we have in the region and the challenges that we have ahead of us. I am going to speak about some of the things that we have to do. In 2020, the educational sector, by means of action of 56 partners amongst UN organizations, international NGOs, and national NGOs grouped in the national platforms and the regional group of education by means of its operations in 17 countries of the region, we reached 153,000 people. 85% of them were boys and girls. By means of actions of advocacy in order to promote the relevance of the right to education as a permanent solution. We did meaningful progress. For instance, the Andres Bello agreement with the support of education cannot wait by means of UNICEF moved forward with the table of equivalences. And also very relevant, we consolidated the lab group for migrants and displaced persons that, along with the world movement forward to childhood, foster the participation of children within the Quito process. We also conducted actions to improve access to the right to education. In terms of formal education, this included the support to the integration of children, migrant children, and also in non-formal education, we focused on working on alternative spaces for learning. We also gave support to understand and to address the problems that have an impact on this and with activities in education in emergencies such as materials, pedagogical materials, internet, amongst others. Support to infrastructure, school infrastructure, with activities such as the washing of hands for schools, with protection, psychosocial support, and psycho-emotional support, and in health with the provision of elements for the provision to prevent COVID-19 in light of this pandemic that has attacked the whole region. We have also worked in terms of the school food, and we have included economic, money transfer in each support area. The main priorities for the regional answer, RP 2020, we have to continue this advocacy with the integration of women, men, boys and girls, refugees in the country, in the receiving countries, and for those that do not provide them for the continuity of their learning by means of providing attention to the urgent needs that pose barriers towards access to education, including the direct provision to the population in order to fulfill their basic needs, thus ensuring that boys and girls and teenagers may remain within the educational system or at least learning in alternative spaces, supporting especially boys and girls with with handicaps and those with indigenous origins. Also, the development and strengthening of the models of accreditation of studies. In some cases, boys, girls, and adolescents from Venezuela may attend schools but without the possibility of certifying their studies, which prevents them from progressing and advancing or even graduating towards the next cycle. With the RPD 2021, we are seeking to look after 574,000 boys, girls, and adolescents from Venezuela with educational needs. So far, we still have to achieve 89% of the population that we have set as a goal for this year. And we have been able to collect just 2% of the funds required for this purpose. That rises to up to $84 million. We have to clarify that this sum only corresponds to the RMRP plan for 2021 because we know that the real needs are much bigger. Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias a Jingo y a Victoria.
Thank you, Jingo, for this picture that introduces to this topic. As Juan Pinzon has said, the objective is to highlight the relevance of education as a key solution in order to provide solutions to this huge problem. This objective that we are committed to, that was appointed at this regional level with 18 organizations and made up by UNICEF and Save the Children, as we said before, the Norwegian Council for Refugees, ECHO, the International Federation for the Red Cross, the Interagency Network, Israel, Austria, ONU Women, Red Americas, the Office of the United Nations for the Reduction of Disasters, among many others. Also being part of the 56 organizations that Victoria mentioned, that we work in the groups, working groups that also today we acknowledge the huge work they conduct in the different territories. This team wants to provide a space for the articulation of political efforts, intersectoral efforts, and also to provide support to the ministries seeking to develop a humanitarian answer, an effective answer that works on the educational sector. Now, in order to begin our dynamic, I would like to tell you about the structure of this space.
como importantes para la respuesta educativa de este fenómeno migratorio. En cada parte
In
llamaremos
each place, we're going to call upon our great members of the panels in order to offer solutions regarding the steps we have given and the steps that we still need to give. It's going to be a long agenda, but obviously we need to listen to everyone in order to have a bigger solution. Now, I'm going to make a particular announcement regarding the safeguarding that we have in the education group. All adults who are here, we commit ourselves to report any kind of inappropriate behavior during this event because we have boys, girls, and adolescents participating here, not only as members of the panel, but they are also going to be connected. Boys, girls, and adolescents may express their opinions here, and they are not to be judged. This space is also for boys, girls, and adolescents to feel safe and provide their own opinions. And to begin our dynamic, our activity, I would like to show you a video that the R4V has prepared, a video that R4V has prepared for this important session that is going to reinforce what Jim and Victoria have said. And right afterwards, we will go on with our members of the panels. The educational sector of the Interagency Coordination for Migrants of Venezuela is made of 56 partners in 17 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. The priorities of this sector are: 1. To advocate for the promotion of public policies that secure the right to education to boys, girls, and adolescents who are refugees, migrants, and receiving communities. 2. To improve the community of national key actors and regional actors in terms of education to guarantee access, permanence, and ending of educational cycles. 3. Guarantee the ministers of education of each country have access to data based on age, among other. In 2020, the education sector reached to 152,000 people by means of: 1. Actions to promote the relevance of the right to education to boys, girls, and boys who are refugees. 3. Support to the integration of boys, girls, and adolescents who are refugees and migrants in the educational systems, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Support to complement the actions for the access and permanence of boys, girls, and adolescents, refugees, and migrants by means of didactic material and support to school infrastructure. The main needs identified in 2021 are: integration of boys, girls, and adolescents who are refugees and migrants in the educational systems in their receiving countries. 2. Development and strengthening of the framework and mechanisms for acknowledgement, validation, and accreditation of status. 3. Attention given to specific problems. This year, we expect to reach 574,000 people, and for this, we are going to need $84 million, as it was established in the plan for refugees from Venezuela 2021. For more information, please go to r4v.info. Well, now to begin, we're going to work in this first round of questions. We're going to work on the first recommendation that we have mentioned, which is to guarantee the right to education for boys, girls, and migrants, where the members of the panel will tell us why this action is important and what we have achieved so far. We're going to begin with the questions. So the first question will be answered by two of our specialists. The first answer will be given by Dr. Claudia Uribe. She's the Regional Director of UNICEF from Latin America and the Caribbean. So I would like to ask you, what is the relevance of guaranteeing access to the right of education of boys, girls,
inmigrantes. Adelante.
boys, girls, adolescents,
Muchísimas gracias,
migrants. Thank you.
Susana.
Thank you, Susanna.
Comenzar por
Well,
decirles que
I would like to
vivimos
begin
una
by saying that
emergencia
we're living a
sanitaria, social
sanitary,
y
social, and
económica
economic
sin
crisis
precedentes
unprecedented
causada por la pandemia
caused by the
que ha
pandemic
puesto de manifiesto
that
la
has
complejidad
highlighted
y la
the
interdependencia de nuestro mundo.
interdependency of our
Hoy
world.
no resulta exagerado
Today
decir que
is not an
ninguno de
exaggeration
ustedes
to
o
say that there
personas
are no
no se haya visto
there isn't
afectada de
somebody who
alguna
hasn't
manera
been
u otra
affected somehow in one way or another by the
en este
current situation.
contexto se ha
In
vuelto
this context, it
especialmente
has
claro
become
la
specifically
cualidad
clear
protectora y
the protective
multiplicadora de la
quality
educación,
of education,
especialmente para
especially
poblaciones en
for
situación de
populations in
vulnerabilidad.
situation of
Por esto,
vulnerability
niños,
as
niñas,
boys,
adolescentes,
girls, and
refugiados
adolescents,
y
refugees,
migrantes.
and migrants.
Para este grupo
For this group,
poblacional, poder insertarse en
being
sistemas
able to
escolares de los
take part
países
in
de
the school
acogida
systems of the receiving countries
significa no solo poder dar
doesn't mean
continuidad a su
only
trayectoria educativa,
to
sino además
continue,
tener
but
acceso
also
a
to
la
have
educación
access
escolar, la salud, el
to
agua,
have
el
access to
saneamiento, la
water,
higiene
food,
y el apoyo
hygiene,
pedagógico
and
y
pedagogical
social
and
que
psychosocial support
necesitan.
that they
La
may
educación
need.
es además una
Education is
oportunidad de
also an
integración,
opportunity for
no solo
integration,
de las y los
not only
estudiantes, sino también de sus
for the
familias.
students, but
La
also for their
evidencia
families. The
demuestra que en
evidence
situaciones
shows
de
us that even
circunstancias críticas
in
de
critical
comunidades
circumstances of emergencies,
incluso cuando
and
las
even
comunidades han
when
perdido
communities
por
have
completo, la
lost
educación
everything,
sigue
education
permaneciendo una
remains
prioridad
amongst
para
one of
las
the main
familias.
priorities for families.
Esto está estrechamente
This is
vinculado
closely
a que
linked
frente a la
to the fact
tragedia
that
de la crisis en las
in
que
light of
vivimos, la educación provee
difficulties,
esperanza,
education
de estabilidad,
provides
de
hope,
seguridad,
stability,
de protección y un
protection,
sentido de
and
futuro
a
para
feeling
niños,
of
niñas y jóvenes.
future
En
for
este sentido, no se puede negar
boys and girls. In
que
this
la
regard,
educación rompe
it's not an exaggeration to say that
estereotipos,
education saves lives.
que la
This
educación no
reaffirms
puede
that
ser una
education
respuesta
cannot be
posterior de la
something that
respuesta
may
para
be
la
put
situación de
off
personas refugiadas y migrantes,
in light of the current
sino que
situation of
debe
migrants, but it
articularse desde
must
las
be
autoridades a nivel
worked
nacional y
upon
local,
in terms of
asegurando el
regional and local
financiamiento necesario.
authorities by
Estas
ensuring the
acciones no se pueden
financing. This
implementar
action may not be
desconociendo los sistemas
implemented by overlooking the
tradicionales de
national
educación,
systems of
dada
education
su
because
fortalecimiento y su
from its
financiamiento
strengthening and its
depende la
financing
posibilidad de dar respuestas
depend the
efectivas y
likelihood of
sostenibles en
providing
el tiempo.
sustainable educational
Finalmente,
solutions in
me
time.
gustaría señalar
I would like to
que los
highlight
retos
also
globales,
that the global
regionales
context,
y
the regional
nacionales del
context, and the
mundo,
national
la
context
crisis
of several
supervenida
crises
por
that
el cambio
overlap
climático, la
as the
sanitaria,
climate,
la económica y
sanitary, the
otras,
economic crisis as
nos
well,
muestra que fortalecer a los
show us that
sistemas
strengthening
educativos
the educational
para
systems
responder a la
in order to
situación de
respond
personas migrantes y
to the
refugiadas
to
no solo beneficia
migrants
a esta
will not
población,
only benefit this
también
group of
fortalece
this
la
population, but
capacidad
will
de
also strengthen
adaptación y resiliencia
the
de la educación
resilience
en su conjunto
of the
para
system
este contexto
by its
cambiante.
own right
Es
within
decir,
this
de
changing
cualquier
context. In other
región,
words, it will
país o
benefit also
ciudad
their
en el que
receiving
se
community in a
los
direct
países de la
manner.
región
The countries of
en
a
todo el
region
proceso
within the
educativo
framework of the
han
Quito process
demostrado un
have
compromiso
shown an
extraordinario
extraordinary
para
commitment
incluir a
to
estudiantes y
include
migrantes
students, migrant students, and refugee
en los
students
sistemas nacionales de
in the national
educación.
systems of education.
Aprovecho esta
I would
oportunidad
like
para
to take this
saludarlos y
opportunity to
renovar
salute you
nuestro
all and to
compromiso
renew our
con
commitment
nuestros socios para
and our
seguir
partners
fortaleciendo
to
los
continue
sistemas de
strengthening
educación
the
públicos.
educational, the
Muchas
public
gracias.
educational systems. Thank you so much, Susana.
Gracias, doctor Uribe, por su relevante reflexión. Usted ha tocado unos puntos muy importantes. Ahora
Thank you, Dr. Uribe,
pregunta,
because you have
seguimos a la misma
talked
pregunta
about
que
important
planteamos
points.
antes. Oriana
Now
es protagonista
it's
de
the
este
turn
fenómeno
of
migratorio.
Oriana.
Ella es una de las
Orania,
especialistas
she is
investigadoras.
one of
Oriana
the persons who has lived the
tiene poblaciones
situation.
educativas
She immigrated to
de
Peru.
añadida
I
relevancia
would
para
like to
garantizar el
know
acceso a los derechos
for
educativos
you,
para
what
los
is the
niños, niñas y
importance of
adolescentes.
guaranteeing the access
Adelante.
to the right of education for boys, girls, adolescents, and youth? Hello, I'm glad to be here. My name is Oriana. I would like to say that education is a an essential priority in the development of many boys, girls, and adolescents, because this system becomes a home where we can get education in academic level and human level. The importance of education is born within the values, the empathy, the knowledge, and resilience. This right has an influence in the social life of young people. Schools, universities, and other educational entities host the future civilizations that will improve the world. The education and its importance on this right are essential. When we talk about the guaranteeing a functional right as education for migrants, we have to have a global overlook, because when a country decides to host migrants, they have to ensure to provide the rights equally, because everybody is a human being. There have been improvements in these subjects thanks to the educational programs, but the main problem is that families, they don't prioritize the access to education for their children, or maybe they cannot do it, they cannot afford to do it. So the lack of information can become a barrier too. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Oriana. We thank you for having prepared for talking to us today. The participation of Madam Maria Victoria Angulo, Ministry of Education from Colombia. She cannot be with us live today, but she has sent us a video. Before going to her, we would like to salute her. Hello, this is a very special opportunity for me to say hello, and I would like to recognize all the leadership of the Canadian government, UNICEF, UNESCO, Save the Children, and the Minister of Education from Argentina is joining us today, and the ambassador of Norway in Colombia. We are all gathered together to improve the system and know how can we integrate them, the Venezuelan migrants here. We thank the Minister of Education from Colombia. And the question we asked her is the following: how have we guaranteed the exercise of the right to education to boys, girls, and teens and youth migrants in Colombia? Well, the national government, led by President Luque 3 years ago, has been working hard to create opportunities, solidarity, and host Venezuelan migrants. We have done a lot since 2018. We have improved from 34,000 to more than 400,000 students. We have done it with the help of the local governments, who have worked to include these boys and girls in the educational system. In the Colombian system, we talk about a pathway. So this has helped young people to access to education. We also have the help of international entities, and they have helped us also to implement humanitarian corridors, because we have care of the entire process, we have to guarantee that they can access education during their stay and their movement within the country. We also have had teachers that have decided to work on co-living and improve all the protocols of the educational system. When we talk about empathy, socio-emotional skills, the difference and the educational environment is the one that has to make us work together with the health department to protect the life, but also to protect the educational system. We have had a third wave of the pandemic, and it has been difficult to continue, but we keep working with them in the implementation of biosecurity elements and the vaccinations of the teachers. We all have to work together to guarantee for the migrants an educational system characterized by inclusion. We thank the presentation of the Minister of Education from Colombia, who has shown us how some countries have managed to help people to get the right of education. Now I leave the floor to my colleague Juan Pinzon, who is going to be in charge of the next block of questions. Thank you very much, Sue. In this block, we will talk about how to reinforce the capacities of the educational system to respond to the educational needs of boys, girls, adolescents, and youth. Everybody has to be coordinated in order to respond to the needs of this sector. I'm glad to present you Ángela María Escobar. She is the Director of Strategic Planning of RET Americas, and she's representing the coalition of CSOs for the defense of the rights of refugees, migrants, and displaced persons in Latin America and the Caribbean. Welcome, Ana María. How can we reinforce the joint and coordinated work between the government, the United Nations, NGOs, in order to respond to the needs of migrant boys, girls, adolescents, and youth? First, I would like to thank the government of Canada for creating this space. I would like to thank also the coalition of CSOs for the defense of the right of refugees, migrants, and displaced persons in Latin America and the Caribbean. This occasion is a chance to reflect on the construction of society. Sometimes we can think that certain things have reached a stability point, but other ones have to change. As UNESCO says, the construction of societies has to be based on human rights. The transformational power of the skills that is stated in the 2030 agenda has to be always in place. This should be an effort between the state, the Nations United, the United Nations, NGOs, and the efforts that are being done for integrating the Venezuelan migrants is a reflect of what is being done in Colombia. In order to reinforce the joint work and the coordination between the governments, United Nations and NGOs, we can talk about 5 actions. The first one focus on the development of leadership of the state through their educational authorities. The ones who must intervene in education has to respect the local educational system. They have to find practical and long-lasting solution inside the system. Of course, in the framework or the local priorities. And this is here where all the parties have to participate. Because even if they have a good intentions, there are really a lot of impacts. The second action that is proposed is to reinforce capacity building to different actors, to set partnerships, to create synergies with simple and innovative responses that could adapt to the reality of the context and the migrant population, but also to the host communities. And this response needs an extreme coordination capacity and a lot of resources to be able to coordinate, set partnerships, to use resources and create synergies. This coordination has to be articulated and has to be funded to respond to the exigence of this problem. The third action is to implement a response because migrant families are mobile inside the host country or when they go to another country before settling. And this makes more difficult to access and to stay in the educational system. We have not found a solution yet because we need programs to look at this in an articulate way to be able to give access to the population, in particular to the migrant and refugees and their families. Another element is that we have to focus our resources in taking care of these crises. The governments, the CSOs, they can respond in order to take care and respond to the needs of this population. We have to reinforce educational systems and we have to avoid isolated actions that are not within the framework of the system. We have to have an holistic regard, an holistic view. For example, we can think about distributing resources in a more similar way. We have to have the participation of the government, of donors, of the private sector, and every action has to be articulated. If we do so, if we have this support, we can increase and improve the response and the attention towards durability, sustainability of this program. These holistic interventions manage to have a better response, and education sector is not the exception. This has to be included in every sector's actions because education is one of the sectors that needs more investment. And finally, we have to keep implementing common agendas for cooperation with governments, CSOs, and agencies of the United Nations in order to understand the situation with a multidimensional view. It is really important also to listen to the population, listen to their needs. We have to understand and identify their opportunities, their resources. We have to try to work within the educational system through their needs, and we still need an articulate work with the help of the international community. Of course, the situation of Venezuelan people has created 10 times less resources than any other crisis in the world. We need to reinforce the help in order to transform lives. Thank you, Juan. Thank you very much, Ángela María. You have talked about 5 key elements, and I would say that it is really important to have the help of the civil society to reinforce the capacities of the educational systems. We will watch a video now. Thank you. The program Aprendiendo Unidos has been designed in the framework of the project as an opportunity for boys, girls, and adolescents that were not included in the educational system, in this case, Venezuelan migrants. So they can be included in the Peruvian education with formal education. I remember that one night I received a call, and what was the main objective? To capacity building in communication and the social emotional skills, but also to attract the boy and the girl and the adolescent into an educational system. Yes, I have had the opportunity to continue studying here in Peru. Now, even if they are not registered, they can participate and they can study. Children need us, and this program is helping them to materialize their dreams. Thank you. Well, we will start block number 4. In this block, we will discuss the importance of implementing articulated mechanisms to recognize previous studies and previous knowledge of refugee and migrant boys, girls, adolescents, and youth in order to be able to change.
Desde su perspectiva y trabajo con el Convenio Andrés Bello, ¿cuáles son las acciones que se han tomado o que se pueden tomar para garantizar el acceso al derecho a la educación para los niños, niñas, adolescentes y jóvenes migrantes? Adelante, doctora Adel.
Muy buenos días, muchas gracias, Juan. Bienvenidos todos los que están participando de este interesante e importante panel y a todos los panelistas que nos acompañan en la mañana de hoy. Bueno, uno de los temas misionales que mayor atención ha recibido por parte de la Organización del Convenio Andrés Bello desde su creación en 1970 hasta el día de hoy es sin lugar a dudas el derecho a la educación. Acorde con este propósito, el Tratado Constitutivo de nuestra organización en su artículo 4 establece el reconocimiento de estudios mediante tablas de equivalencia para los niveles de educación básica o primaria y media o secundaria. Este compromiso de obligado cumplimiento que suscriben los países miembros, del cual Venezuela es parte, al ingresar a la organización, lleva aplicándose 48 años contribuyendo a garantizar no solo el acceso a la educación, sino también la permanencia y continuidad de los estudios en situación de movilidad en el sistema educativo de los países de acogida. La tabla de equivalencias del CAP es un esfuerzo sostenido en el tiempo, pues requiere su permanente actualización para responder con precisión a cambios, modificaciones o reformas que ocurren en cualquiera de los sistemas educativos de los países miembros de la organización. En los últimos años se vienen implementando acciones orientadas a brindar una mayor accesibilidad a la herramienta y el acercamiento a la comunidad. De manera continuada, se trabaja en entregar información práctica a los usuarios mediante el aplicativo interactivo.
Work in order to ensure this that allow us to here in 3 categories each educational system and to compare even with 3 countries at the same time the equivalences in terms of studies. It is important to highlight that the commitment signed by the member countries regarding the tables of equivalences along these almost 50 years of existence, it has always been reaffirmed and looked after in terms of its compliance. Without exception, we have had the strong will to apply and to promote in all levels of the national territories the use of the table of equivalences, acknowledging its usefulness and the way in which it facilitates the families the rapid and the quick access to education in the receiving country. The work of improvement is permanent, and we try to optimize all the other variables, all the other complex variables that are inside these mechanisms that deals above all with people. This human dimension is the key for us. And the table of equivalences is a remarkable element of this. That's the way how the access to the educational system of students when they lack documents or incomplete documents while they become regular in terms of their legal state. We have achieved, being able to speed up their access to the educational system. Another action that is worth to be mentioned in this effort to ensure the right of access to education of boys, girls, and adolescents has been the creation of the network of technicians that work with the table of equivalences, with whom we have contact 24/7, and with the technical responsible in each and every Ministry of Education of the 12 member countries. This allows for an online work and the resolution of special cases in a fast manner. By means of the network, we facilitate the reception of documents and study documents that have not been legalized, that are not legible, that maybe got lost or maybe got damaged, or maybe that they don't have it at all. And we have been able to provide answers that allow for the quick access to the educational system. As Victoria mentioned, thanks to an alliance with UNICEF and its partner, Education Cannot Wait, we developed the campaign for the table of equivalence called In the School and Better, with the purpose of spreading the use of the table of equivalences, its benefits, virtues, and mechanisms of implementation. This has been a very successful campaign. We count on the technical letter of the table of equivalences, and also in soft copy and also in hard copy in areas that have difficulties in terms of the connection to internet, in order to provide officers, educational officers who work with public in order to consult the users. Even if the work is big, I have to say that it's very gratifying. Only one kid that we can help to continue his studies, her studies, or to have access to education is for us that an award big enough and would have made it worth it. Would have made it worth it. I would like to end my intervention by saying that the task is big and the challenge is even bigger. However, we are more than willing to develop this task in an integral fashion and in a collaborative fashion. And within this spirit, I would like to answer the second part of the question that was asked to me, highlighting two important actions with the purpose that they may be considered for likely strategic alliances with bodies are present our organization in favor of the education of boys, girls, and adolescents in condition of refugees. The first would be here to implementing an initiative of civilization and training of officers from the educational sector responsible for attention to people in condition of mobility, so that they may guarantee the right orientation that may lead to the effective addition of boys, girls, and adolescents to the educational system of the receiving country with a human treatment, a dignified treatment, and with understanding. The second initiative, and I will end my remarks by saying this, is that we have to improve the systematization of information so that we may count on the academic history of boys, girls, and adolescents, and in order to prevent delays in their registration within the educational system because of the lack of information. So we have to have online information available. This would make us this would allow us to provide a better future for boys, girls, and adolescents who are already carrying a heavy burden because of their condition as migrants. Thank you to the organizers of this event for having taken into account this common cause of guaranteeing the right to education of all our boys, girls, and adolescents. And I wish you a future of hope and a great future. And I repeat the commitment of our organization in order to achieve this. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Batista. Very important thoughts. Very good to know. I mean, we know the table of equivalences, but it's very good that we all know about it, all the technical components, all the value that it has in terms of the acknowledgement of studies. Very, very relevant recommendations. I will now move on to Margaret Touch. She's the regional advisor. May remind you that we have simultaneous translation.
We would like to hear your perspective as regional education advisor and the work done at the regional level, much related to the questions that we asked Dr. Batista. What actions have been or can be taken to guarantee the access to the right of education for refugee and migrant children and adolescents? Over to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Juan. Voy a hacer mi presentación en inglés. Entonces, muchas gracias por la oportunidad hoy. So, guaranteeing access to education in a rights-based perspective for refugee and migrant children entails a number of closely interrelated prerequisites and actions, one of which was already mentioned by the previous speaker from CAL. Now, obviously, the first prerequisites are appropriate laws and normative frameworks that guarantee the right to education and at the same time their application at the local and school level through corresponding protocols for the integration of the migrant population into the national education system, as well as mechanisms to ensure the recognition and equivalency of prior learning of refugee and migrant children in the receiving countries. And we just heard the very interesting expose just before. We know also that all receiving countries of Venezuelan children recognize the right to education as a fundamental human right to be implemented without discrimination and independently of the migration status of the child. To implement this right, Colombia, for example, and we heard about this, has put in place a series of very concrete administrative circulars and decrees, which not only flexibilize requirements for children to access education, but also ensure that no educational institution can deny Venezuelan children the integration into the national education system, independently if she or he is in possession of a visa or a regulatory document. Most countries, such as Peru, for example, but also others, have reviewed and adjusted the regulation for the enrollment for undocumented migrant children, including through what is called a location test or prueba de ubicación, which determines at what grade a student can enter the education system and such provides the right and the possibility of that child to enter the system. As was mentioned by earlier panelists, the current sanitary crisis had a major impact on access to education and learning of millions of children in the region, and obviously refugee and migrant children have been particularly affected. It was mentioned in the introduction by our director, Jean Go, that, for example, in Peru, it was estimated that over 50% of Venezuelan children did not have access to the Peruvian education system. But the situation is similar in other countries. And that really tells us about the situation as far as access of migrant and refugee children in the region is concerned, which has worsened through the crisis. And obviously, that calls for special efforts for this group. Now, a lot has been done by receiving governments and supported by UNICEF and its partners, including through the support received through starting with the first emergency response by Education Cannot Wait in 4 countries, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. And more will be done under the multi-year resilience program, which was just initiated in Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and at the regional level. However, much more is required to ensure that all children will return to school and learn. Now, what are some of the areas that require particular attention and support? So in addition from looking at normative frameworks and protocols and how they're being implemented, another element is to ensure access is what is called active search or búsqueda activa for out-of-school children, for the ones that actually are not in school, that are not reached. So this búsqueda activa, what does it do? It helps to identify the children that are out of school and to help them to reconnect and re-engage with school. Now that includes what needs to be done. It includes the development of territorial censuses for the identification of the migrant population, as well as strengthening of information systems for their registry. But at the same time, what is also very important is to work very closely with communities and parents to identify where the out-of-school children are, and then to motivate them, give them incentives, and convince them to return to school. UNICEF country offices, but also partners in Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru have supported governments in this area. A second point is to strengthen educational demand through, for example, the removal of financial and academic barriers such as school fees, uniforms, admission requirements, and also providing economic support to families, in particular in the current crisis situation. When schools reopen, a comprehensive and multi-sectoral approach should be taken, starting with ensuring that learning spaces are safe, protective, and inclusive. Other essential services such as wash, school feeding, and health services will have to be put in place to ensure the safe return to schools and retention education. We have learned through the crisis that digital solutions are an important element for not only ensuring access to and continuity of learning, but also have a great potential for increasing the quality of education and reaching the unreached. And therefore, digital solutions will continue to play a major role when schools reopen, and they already do so. Countries are using a hybrid approach, which requires increased connectivity of schools, devices for students, and high-quality digital solutions. This, however, hinges upon important investments by governments and its partners. I would like to use this opportunity to quickly mention the Reimagine Education initiative, which UNICEF is implementing together with partners in countries, and which aims at increasing access to quality digital learning for millions of children. Current work is ongoing in a number of countries already in the region, which can be shared among other countries. Now, of course, we know that governments have already undertaken major efforts in all of these areas that I mentioned under very, very challenging circumstances and the current economic downturn. And support has been provided by UN organizations, civil society actors, and donors, including through the important seed funding from Education Cannot Wait that I mentioned before and others. But the task ahead is enormous and requires substantial continued joint efforts and funding. So we are all together called to task to continue working together to support governments in their tireless efforts to provide education for all, and in particular to the vulnerable groups and including refugee and migrant children. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Margaret, for your relevant reflections. Very useful information can guide us to ensure direct education for refugee and migrant children. Thank you very much. Bueno, me paso de nuevo al español, dándole de nuevo la bienvenida a la doctora Claudia Uribe, directora regional de la UNESCO para América Latina y el Caribe. Estimada Claudia, directamente vinculado con los temas que la doctora Batista y Margaret han mencionado, queríamos consultarle. ¿En qué áreas se debe trabajar, capitalizar e invertir para la creación de un marco regional sobre reconocimiento, validación y acreditación de aprendizajes previos en los países de acogida? Adelante, doctor.
Sí, muchas gracias por tu pregunta, Juan. Yo creo que hay que reflexionar que si bien las respuestas educativas que garantizan el derecho a la educación de refugiados y migrantes son eminentemente nacionales, es importante no perder de vista que existen dimensiones de la respuesta que requieren soluciones transfronterizas y multipaís. Entre ellas, por supuesto, se encuentra el reconocimiento de estudios, el fortalecimiento de los marcos normativos nacionales y regionales y la generación de evidencia colectiva sobre estos
frameworks. And now, regarding everything that has been said, I would like to say that the priorities of the educational system, it's important to mention the Quito progress. We have to salute the efforts made by the ministries of the education to be able to include migrant and refugee students. This has been an important improvement, and we recognize that. There has been improvement also in data, and this has allowed us to implement politics and local educative responses. There are still challenges because with the data and tracking system, we have to find the people that are not accessing education right now. And there has to be also an engagement from government to participate in the recognition of studies and diplomas in the higher education. This has been worked in the Quito process because we have to move forward in this framework to have information available and to be able to have a better tracking of the educational career of these refugees and migrants. Since in the UNESCO, we have been working closely with the ministries of the education in the process of Quito, and we are still working for these initiatives can reinforce the responses at the national level. And I stop here, Juan. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Uribe. We have to take into account the engagements, more importantly, in the framework of the Quito process. Now, we must not forget the participation of migrants. And I am pleased to give the floor again to Oriana. Thank you very much for participating. How has been the integration process to the educational system? Tell us about it, Oriana. Well, this subject for me is really interesting because it allows me to focus on the sensibilization for future generations. This migration can give us a vision of the situation of boys, girls, and adolescents. In a holistic view, I would say that my experience in a secondary institution has been really different. I have had good moments and bad moments. Am I going to be the same as the other ones? Am I going to be able to integrate? But for example, my sister and I have felt sometimes excluded and discriminated, and people were talking about the situation in my country. But despite all this, we have had positive experiences. I have had different experiences that have led to the person I am now. Now I participate actively in the life of my school. I am the first migrant student to have participated in local elections in my school. And these opportunities have to be taken into account. When I went to secondary school, I had to go through an equivalence process to be able to take into account the studies that I followed previously. But there's a problem for me because I can still not have recognized my students in Peru. I would like to talk about the experience of other people, other young persons that live different experiences in different countries. And the inclusion process into an educational system, it's really not easy, but we try to be included in the systems. I would like to say a phrase of Paulo Coelho: a kid can teach things to adults. A kid can be happy and can demand what they require. Thank you very much. Oriana, thank you very much. It has been great to have you in this panel, to have your perspective, not only about the educational system, but also regarding your personal experience. And we see that there's a lot to do. Now, we have another video and then we will continue. In the case of children, we try to help them with the library, with the restaurant. I was sad because I wanted to study, and this program has helped us help the other people. I have learned mathematics and communication and environment. I'm happy because I'm at school again. This program has given dignity back to the children. I have made friends and now I can play. Children are happy, they are free. Some children arrive here and they are afraid to be accepted.
Bueno, en esta parte queremos seguir ofreciendo y reforzando
estás en silencio,
las ideas.
Bueno, en este bloque.
Well, in this block, we would like to continue to talk about the efforts that have been done, and we would like to talk about the strengthening of the legal framework in order to guarantee education for boys, girls, adolescents, and youth. Legal frameworks can guarantee not only the access, but also the stay of these children at school. We would like to give you insights of the Ministry of Education of Colombia, Maria Victoria Angulia. We have taken the example of Colombia regarding the legal frameworks that have been adapted. That's why we'd like to ask her. To show how a legal framework can go beyond its borders, and how can we capitalize the statute of regularization in Colombia for migrant boys, girls, adolescents, and youth, not only in Colombia, but in the region. The statute of migrant protection defined, set by President Luque, and this has been recognized by international organizations. This is not only to show solidarity, empathy, and respect, but also for the integration of migrants. And this has created a flexibility in the system. And we have a unique registration for migrants, not only to access the educational system, but only to get grades, to be evaluated. We know that we have to have an active search to avoid desertion. There are regions as the Norte of Santander, Guajira, we have worked with the local governments, with the civil society, and the cooperation that is here in this conference. And we see that the guarantee of the right to access education is important. This statute has been an example that shows how can we work properly for migrants. And this is a work we do every day to guarantee the access to the educational system. Thank you. And we would like to say that there are efforts in the region, but we have to support them. We are just beginning with this. The states are engaged, and this can be seen in their local policies, but we have to continue working at the local level in order to make sure that these measures are effective. Now I leave the floor to my colleague Juan. Thank you very much. So now we will discuss the importance of reinforcing the role of educational institutions. I would like to leave the floor to the next panelist, Margaret Such.
Okay, so from your perspective, the role of teachers and how do education centers become spaces for the protection and integration of migrant children and young people? So over to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan. So, as you know, teachers play a crucial role in integrating refugee and migrant children into schools of the host community and reconnecting them with their interrupted learning trajectories while dealing at the same time with their mental health and protection needs and ensuring their welfare and safety. It is the teacher who will evaluate the learning levels and needs of the child and provide the right support to ensure that she will learn at the right level and not drop out. It is the attitude of the teacher that creates a welcoming space that allows the newly arrived child to feel part of the community and to feel respected and valued. It is the teacher who can guide the other children who receive their migrant and refugee peers to understand not only how difficult it has been for them to leave their country, their families, and their friends, but also to see the added value of the experience and the culture they bring with them. The role of the teacher is also fundamental to eliminate all forms of discrimination and xenophobia. All of these are major tasks for which most teachers are unfortunately not necessarily prepared. Often, existing teacher professional training, be it pre or in service, falls short in preparing teachers for effectively supporting students' learning, especially in rural areas, in multi-grade classroom settings, or for students with diverse psychosocial and special needs and disabilities. Moreover, teachers themselves require support. They suffer from elevated levels of stress and mental health issues due to the pandemic, which also impacts their ability to respond to the needs of children. Recognizing that teachers are pivotal for quality education and learning outcomes, as well as for the well-being of the child, investments in teachers' training, professional development, and support are critical. This needs to become even more urgent in light of the current crisis, which requires the preparation of teachers to teach in digital and/or hybrid modalities and helping students to reconnect to their learning trajectories after they return to school. Ministries of education of Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, as well as in other countries in the region that have received migrant and refugee children have made enormous efforts to develop the capacities of teachers in successfully integrating these children into their education systems and to effectively support their learning as well as those from the vulnerable host communities. This work has been supported by the international community and civil society which financial support from donors such as Education Cannot Wait. In Ecuador, for example, support was provided in preparing teachers for the specific needs of receiving refugee and migrant children. Teachers have received information on policies and normative frameworks that guarantee access to education, as well as training on how to guide and facilitate the registration process for the population in situations of human mobility. Also, they have received information and awareness raising on the removal of barriers to access to education, as well as training on combating xenophobia and discrimination in the classroom and monitoring behavioral change, as well as providing psychosocial support. In Colombia, it is planned to provide support for offering comprehensive blended teachers' professional development that are aligned with the priorities of the provincial and the National Ministry of Education to equip them with those skills required to improve learning and well-being. These will focus on literacy, numeracy, and STEM, inclusive and gender-responsive digital pedagogy, positive discipline, and identification and referral of children with MHPSS needs. At regional level, 2 virtual teacher training courses were developed and implemented in 2020 by the Regional Education Emergency Working Group, and will continue to expand these further under the current MERP. And currently, UNICEF is developing a teacher preparedness training package for reopening of schools. So a lot of progress has been made, lots of work has been done, but we know that the COVID-19 pandemic brought tremendous new challenges, and that governments require continued and upscaled support by UN organizations, civil societies, and donors to build the capacity of teachers and education personnel as required. So activities implemented so far have allowed us to lay the groundwork for this priority area, but further investment is needed to ensure that each country has the adequately trained and supported teacher training workforce to respond to the needs of refugee and migrant children. Thank you.
Many thanks, Margaret. Of course, we can never forget the super important role of teachers and educational centers are key spaces for protection and integration and all the challenges that you mentioned. Thank you very much, Margaret. Bueno, me paso entonces de nuevo al español.
Now I will change again into English. I will give the floor to Ana María Escobar. She is Director of Strategic Planning. Welcome, Ana María. Regarding this protection and integration theme, what good practices can you mention on the integration and intercultural processes in schools? Thank you, Juan. Definitely, yes. We don't have enough time to be able to
Tal vez podemos citar 5 o 6 buenas prácticas que se están desarrollando en la región sobre los procesos de integración e interculturalidad en contextos educativos de personas refugiadas y migrantes. Partimos de reconocer que una buena práctica es una experiencia que se ha implementado con resultados positivos, ha sido eficaz y útil en el contexto concreto. De igual manera, contribuye al afrontamiento, a la mejora o solución de dificultades que se presenten en el ámbito educativo con las personas refugiadas, migrantes y sus comunidades de acogida. En función de este espacio y pues haciendo honor a la representación de la coalición de organizaciones de la sociedad civil, señalar algunas buenas prácticas desarrolladas por las organizaciones que además hacen parte del Grupo Regional de Educación, hacen parte de la coordinación en el marco de la Art4B y por supuesto están en articulación con las autoridades educativas. Estas buenas prácticas podemos decir que hemos encontrado que se pueden hallar en 2 grandes bloques, siendo uno el fortalecimiento de capacidades de las comunidades educativas en el marco de los planes nacionales y otro directamente enfocado a atender las necesidades y a fortalecer la participación de niños, niñas, adolescentes y jóvenes principalmente. Una primera buena práctica la encontramos en el Perú, en Huancavelica, zona alto andina, la cual
In
ya
this region that provides support for pregnant women so that they may remain within the educational system by working in activities that foster writing, reading, and other activities, thus achieving a greater interaction between teachers with the adolescents. A second good practice that we may mention is in Colombia, the invisible spokesperson that promotes communication with the migrants in three specific topics: gender, sexual and reproductive rights, and xenophobia, that tackle from the perspective of rights, and each of them has two chapters. One chapter takes place with the accompaniment of an specialist, and the other one tries to relate people from the communities in order to think based on their experiences. And another good practice that we found also in Peru is Let's Know Peru, with the objective of promoting intercultural participation between boys and girls, with Peruvian boys and girls, where boys and girls migrants from Venezuela know basic elements of the Peruvian culture, and also Peruvian boys and girls know about the Venezuelan culture, and they identify the similar aspects, the things that are beneficial for both of them. Boys and girls feel proud of their own culture, of course, but at the same time, they acknowledge the good things of the other culture. The material has been applied and has become a practical tool for teachers and families. These good practices shared so far, these experiences shared so far, that highlight intercultural education, they have an inclusive condition that, and we begin from the respect and cultural about cultural diversity. This contributes to understand migration as something that is positive, as an opportunity in order to enrich the social processes from the pluralism, not only as an answer to the need of access to rights from the migrant population. The second block, we may focus it in the strengthening of the capacities of educational communities. We may highlight a very good practice in Ecuador, that is the implementation of the program Community Educational Inclusive Communities, whose objective is focused on improving the inclusion of women in the educational system of Ecuador by means of the process of action that involves all the educational communities, the principals, all the teachers, parents, mothers, amongst many others. This strategy is based on the visualization of a teaching personnel as a determining actor in this process, because this contributes to the well-being, and especially in the context of COVID-19. Also, we have managed to add these practices with the families and the teachers. This has been related with the program we all learn together. A fifth good practice has to do with that was developed in Peru, focused on participation of on the campaign led by the Ministry of Education for the good return to the school year, focused to Venezuelan migrant families. It has a multi-mode system so that families may know how to access, where to go, what are the rights of their boys and girls in terms of education. They pick cases and they promote the importance of education and the importance about not dropping out of school, and also for Venezuelan families that are most vulnerable, they receive support in order to improve their internet connection. A sixth good practice, if the time allows me, in Colombia, in the Guajira region, with the with the regional office of education, they developed the inter-exchange of successful experiences. This space allowed us to understand that education is it plays a key role in situations of emergency, and we have to convey this. We counted on the participation of teachers from several municipalities from the Guajira and other departments in the border, who, with experts, they share experiences on educational inclusion, and amongst other things, they reflected how music is a means of connection in the classroom. This has been one of the answers given by the Colombian state towards Venezuelan boys and girls. We might say that at this time, this has been just a small brush of the situation that is taking place, of the plans that are taking place in the educational community as a whole, the leading organizations in regional, local, and national actors. The conclusion it may be as big as basic. That is that it is important to count on mechanisms in order to have access to the exchange of good practices from every single point of view with active participation of all the parties involved. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Angela Maria. Very important to listen to all your comments, and I will keep your message that we have to share all of this. Well, now let's enter to the final block. We're going to highlight the importance of promoting the intersector support. We have to ensure the access to services in order to protect their right to education. I'm going to go to English.
UN Resident Coordinator for Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin. This is Walter, welcome. So in relation to the importance of intersectionality, and from your perspective as Resident Coordinator, why is intersectoral action necessary to ensure the realization of the right to education of migrant children, adolescents, and young people? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Juan, and also thank you for switching to English, as otherwise I would have had to torture you with my very bad Spanish, so thank you so much. Also, thank you for having me here, and to really reflect just quickly on the why and what kind of intersectoral action is necessary from also the perspective of social protection to ensure not just access, but lasting access to education for migrant children, refugee children, adolescents, and young people in general. So just quickly, from where I'm sitting, in particular, I'm taking the background of Trinidad and Tobago, 7 sea miles off the coast of Venezuela, traditionally a country, that saw, streams of migrants and refugees coming through, never with the problem. But of course, the numbers over the past few years for Venezuela changed the attitude, and very much the attitude of the public. So we're not just talking, politicians and governments and bureaucrats, but the pressure, the public's perception is on how the country deals with this. In questioning the numbers, the government then in 2019 started to register, offering work permits to Venezuelan refugee and migrants, and re-registered this year to see again who's on the ground. So that left us with the number officially of roughly 2,400 children on the ground, while the colleagues from UNHCR have an unofficial estimation that puts the children of migrants and refugees on the ground more in the area of 5,700 of mostly school-age children in the country. And while to many colleagues in Latin America, these are small numbers, for these small island states, these numbers are big, because against the size of the population, it's a considerable challenge. The country's Education Act in Trinidad and Tobago actually upholds, on paper, the principle of non-discrimination. Everyone has access, doesn't matter what language, doesn't matter what religion. But that's very much challenged by the fact that the overall investment in education is quite low, on the lower side, as compared to the rest of the Caribbean in Trinidad and Tobago, and B, only actually children that have, so to say, a waiver from the Ministry of National Security through this process can actually be enrolled. So that really leaves a massive amount of children from, across the spectrum of refugees, migrants outside of the school system outside of the access of education. So it was against this backdrop, just to quickly reflect, that we needed here to achieve, a well-structured coordination and the engagement and also the translation of the humanitarian principles on the ground, that an education working group was formed in Trinidad and Tobago, consisting of the United Nations, civil society, religious institutions, but also private sector and IFIs. This in itself was an important step because it created this, so to say, cross-sectoral coalition of the willing, which is happy to support this cause across the spectrum. So of course, UNICEF and UNHCR led. It has key NGOs in the country, such as Living Water Community, but also, for example, the Catholic Education Board of Management, just to name a few, because bringing in the church and in this context, in this society, was very important. This group is trying to, focus on, so to say, 5 areas to really bring it together across sectors. Foremost, of course, there's this goal to provide timely education responses from early education to, secondary education for migrant and refugee children. This basic right continues to be elusive here in Trinidad and Tobago for over 4,000 school-aged children. To address this, the group or this coalition has developed and implemented a number of approaches from multiple angles, such as creating the Equal Place, which is an alternative educational initiative, the creation of virtual-friendly, child-friendly spaces, also working with the churches, in particular the Roman Catholic Church that is running a lot of schools here, and enrolling children in Spanish distance learning. So really the aim and goal was to bring a very diversified approach to reach as many as possible, knowing that we will still miss some. Secondly, very much a target is really to build the capacity directly at the source and advocate and, train for the provision of durable educational opportunities and alternatives for the inclusion of migrant and vulnerable children. So as part of this, a lot of the work is going on to increase the capacity of the implementing partners, principals, teachers, it was mentioned before, in areas related to human rights, migrant children rights, how to manage now very diverse educational communities, or the integration of refugee and migrant children. Another very important area of engagement was really to identify the sort of protection gaps that hinder the success to education, to guarantee it to children and that they remain protected during humanitarian situations. So as one example for that we encountered here, a small study revealed that in particular adolescent girls choose very often to stay at home because there is a feeling of insecurity in the community, but also in public transportation. And they reported a higher number of incidents where their security was threatened. So this type of information is relevant, not just for the implementing agencies and the civil society partners, but also with national agencies to allow for relevant mitigation measures to put in place. Again, another reason why you need to go across sectors and you really bring a much more integrated approach to solving and ensuring this access to education. Equally important, I think actually it's very much at the head here also, is to coordinate and extend the mobilization of financial resources and partnerships, to support this approach in Trinidad and Tobago on a wider scale. Because what we really learned is you need to bring a wider angle to it that looks at the issue of education for vulnerable children in general, even beyond refugee and migrant children. Why? Because it's very important if you argue with the public, right? A public, citizens in this time and day of COVID-19, they feel already left behind. They already feel stressed financially. So when you are now going out in your wider coalition to advocate for migrant children, refugees, how do we ensure that they have access on a sustainable basis to education? You need to go wider. You need to take the angle of all vulnerable children that don't have access. That includes children of the nationality of the country. That really helps also you in your advocacy. A very important point also about the widening of the coalition was for us to bring in the IFIs, right? You have to bring in the partners that have the financial muscle and the private sector. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, UNICEF, for example, just started to implement an initiative on digitalizing education together with CAF, the Latin American Development Bank, start working directly with the Ministry of Education. This is an important initiative that obviously helps the country, but it will create, digital solutions to educations that will absolutely profit refugee and migrant children as well. Last but not least, of course, one of the areas that is important to bring in, and that this coalition of the willing, as I call it, is also looking at, is really trying to generate evidence for gender-sensitive educational policies that are costed and scalable in Trinidad and Tobago, where gender-based violence is a huge topic and a challenge. And we really also want to understand and share the analysis and understanding with partners across the board what sort of gender dynamics have an impact on the lives of boys and girls in general, but in particular on the migrant and refugee community. So just to look at, what actions are now necessary, what have we learned to move beyond really on this perspective, what other social protection measures do we need now to encounter, to bring online for a more sustainable success to bringing refugee and migrant children to education and to keep them in the educational systems. One of the things where we realized we need to probably fine-tune more to ensure better access and success is this area of cash assistance. To date, here in on the ground, the humanitarian partners have provided limited cash assistance to migrant and refugee families. It is a high-income country. So in the end, we realized that this also had a direct impact on the ability for children to actually stay in school. The Equal Place initiative that I mentioned earlier saw, in fact, a decrease in the number of children participating in this program in 2020. And upon looking at the details, upon questioning, it became clear that the low attendance was linked to the cost of transportation, to the unavailability of a full-time, full-day program versus half-day. And many of the young people also indicated that in COVID-19 lockdown times and the economic pushback across the society, it really became increasingly difficult for them to continue to participate while the family was facing an economic hit because the parents, even in the informal sector, had lost their jobs, and also because many of the young people now equally were fishing for employment. So in light of that, and without cash assistance, it became actually increasingly impossible for them to attend school. So this has become clear to us that it will be necessary to have a better understanding of the needs of children against their overall living conditions and challenges, and also how cash-based interventions can support this. Another area that wasn't news to us, but it became just even more clear in a times where COVID-19 just amplified all of those challenges was really a very close collaboration of all humanitarian partners is needed. In this area, for example, that I just mentioned of, cash-based interventions, key humanitarian stakeholders here on the ground are now really working together to collaborate on the provision of this sort of assistance to vulnerable Venezuelan migrant and refugee children, families with children. So to help a better division of labor and coordination in that space. For example, UNHCR has agreed to focus on key cash preparedness activities, while UNICEF is taking on more the side on cash plus interventions in the areas of nutrition and education and alternative care for unaccompanied and separated children. Really, so yet again, as we're all so challenged, it's really key to look at the details, who's doing what to avoid overlap for a more efficient coordination. Look, last but not least, and I would end it at that, it really has become clear that a sustainable success and impact can really only be achieved through constant engagement of affected populations. That includes very much also the receiving population. Count that jointly and to help us all to learn, and the why is got to go much broader and to continuously keep it up as advocacy and joint solution finding, so to say. That was just a quick reflection from our side on the ground in the Caribbean, Juan. Thank you so much, and back to you.
Many, many thanks, Mrs. Walter. Very key messages you just gave us. Sectoriality has been essential to ensure the right.
Muchas gracias. Ha sido esencial de ver el trabajo que están haciendo en el Caribe y es una nueva perspectiva para la protección social. Muchas gracias por su presentación. Ahora, I will present two important representatives of the government that help a lot boys, girls, adolescents, and youth, refugees and migrants. I would like to present His Excellency Ambassador of the Government of Canada to Peru and Bolivia. Welcome. Why does your country think it is important to invest in the education of boys, of migrant and refugees, boys, girls, adolescents, and youth? Thank you very much for this invitation, and I congratulate you for the organization of this dialogue, and this is a good preparation to the organization of the donors meeting that Canada is organizing with ACNUR. I will talk about the respect of the rights. For Canada, all boys, girls, and adolescents are subjects of the law. That is why we help states to guarantee the right of education. Through education, we can have access to education and to be empowered. If we have girls and women empowered, they are key actors to sustainable development. That is why our policy for international cooperation, which is feminist, highlights the inclusion of girls and women who have the condition of migrants. Canada supports with educational systems that help women and girls to know their sexual and reproductive health and to know their rights. Also, the economy for well-being. Statistics have reported the presence of 1,500,000 people in Peru, migrants from Venezuela in Peru. According to the data, GDP in 2018, GDP growth in 2018 in Peru is a result of the Venezuelan immigrants in Peru that help improve the economy of the host country. Education is essential to empower girls and adolescents female adolescent, so they are agents of their life projects, and so they can improve the life of their families. And 3, from the well-being, Canada would like to honor the story and the faces of every boy and girl and refugee. We want that immigration be able to give them the possibility to be happy. Our countries engage with migrants, boys, girls, and adolescents, and we help in the projects that are organized with the civil society within United Nations, and we work for women and for girls to have the training to be able to be successful. We help implementing programs for those who have lost their ability or their possibility to get an education. We have a platform for coordinating donors for refugees from Venezuela. We have been making efforts to create coordination mechanisms, GTM, and the Group for the Coordination of Migrants from Venezuela in Peru. I would like to highlight the correspondence between the subjects treated in this event and the aspects that my government supports. Firstly, we build capacities of the educational systems in the host countries, because it's the only way to implement durable, sustainable measures. Secondly, we promote that schools are safe and secure places of integration. And thirdly, we help in improving the educational situation of Venezuelan youth with responses and strategies adapted to every territory. Finally, I would like to end this intervention telling again the engagement of Canada for every boy, girl, adolescent can stay in school and finish school to be able to materialize their life projects. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. This is really important as a host government. I would like to welcome Mr. Ambassador John Peter Opdal, Ambassador to Colombia, Norway, concurrent for Ecuador, Venezuela, and Canada. Mr. Ambassador, we would like to know, in your perspective, why do you think it's important to invest in the education of boys, girls, and adolescents in the region? Firstly, I would like to thank and to salute all the participants in this event, the Ministry of Colombia, Ambassador Jansen, and the representative of the agencies of the United Nations, UNESCO, UNICEF, and the other organizations of the civil society who are with us today. I would like to salute Oriana too, who has shared her experiences with us today. I would like to thank Canada to organize the conference for Venezuelan migrants on June 17th. This is really an important initiative. Access to education is a human right, but in a crisis situation, it is really difficult to apply this right. The role of the education can be key in this context because it gives protection, hope for future opportunities, and it offers some sort of humanity in the life of these people who has been affected. So education has really positive effects, immediate effects, and long-term effects for people and their communities. And for this reason, the fact that we must guarantee access to education is a priority in Norway. In 2020, 5.6% of cooperation aid in Norway has been destined to improving education. And the average is between 2 and 4%. So it is important for donor countries to keep giving money to this objective. Save the Children is one of the key partners in Norway and in the region. We have increased funding for UNICEF, and we always help the important work that is being done by Save the Children in Venezuela and in Colombia to protect childhood and the education. And another way of support from Norway is the fund that for now has multi-annual programs in Colombia and Peru. This initiative aims to guarantee good quality education for boys, girls, and adolescents in crisis situations. Today, we say that humanitarian crises are more and more complex and more long. So the initiative Education in the Way gathers the humanitarian and development donors in order to create a united response. Last year, the pandemic has hardened even more the access to education, and this is another reason to improve the aid in this crisis. Since our embassy here, from our embassy here in Colombia, I want to highlight that more efforts have to be done to guarantee access to education, but we not only protect their future, but also the communities of the host countries in the entire region. I would like to thank UNICEF and Save the Children for organizing this space, and everyone who has been participating here for being involved in these activities that are really important. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you for keeping investing in this sector. Now we are going to watch a last video before going to the closing presentations.
Que nosotros hemos vivido, yo quiero que ellos avancen con su estudio, sean alguien en la vida, ¿verdad?
Nos acercamos a las comunidades mediante campañas informativas sobre mecanismos de prevención del contagio de la COVID-19. Lo segundo era para la convocatoria de cómo matricularse para el programa educativo no formal Aprendiendo Unidos.
Debido a la situación agravada por la pandemia, se hicieron acciones complementarias como la entrega de kits educativos y vales multipropósito para familias beneficiarias del programa.
Cuando recibí el kit, me sentí muy emocionado.
Los crayones de cera, unos lapiceros, tijeras,
cuadernos donde realizar todas mis actividades escolares.
Estaba feliz porque no tenía útiles.
Bueno, queridos amigos y amigas, estamos llegando ya
Dear
casi.
friends, we are arriving to the closing of this journey or this session. I would like to thank you for being with us for 2 hours. We will have the participation now of 2 important panelists. We have been showing the efforts that have been done in the region, and we really hope that we will be receiving funding to be able to offer high level and a safe education for every boy, girl, and adolescent so they can have a dignified life. And moreover, we have to think in the inclusion of handicapped boys and girls. We really hope that we have been able to show everything that has been done in the region. For this last block, we will leave the floor to 2 dear colleagues. Firstly, Education Cannot Wait from Colombia. Colombia is the country who is receiving the largest number of refugees in the region. So we will have the call from this executive for the fund Education Cannot Wait. Maria Paula, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Susana, I would like to thank you. As kids in Colombia say, my education cannot wait. So we have to continue to guarantee a special and safe access to education. I would like to make a summary to have the voice of our partners, our friends from Norway, from UNICEF, from the civil society and the government of Colombia. World has been experiencing the COVID pandemic for more than 1 year, and this has made that the situation of refugees has worsened. In the case of the Latin American region and the Caribbean, this sanitary crisis has had a huge consequence on our children. The social inequity has been improved. And this is what we say, what we watch on TV every day. The closing of schools have had an impact in the lives of all children. But it has been more important in the lives of people with low income, because they cannot access to a computer, to internet, or even a desk. So COVID has worsened the gaps that already existed. We were working already in many countries in Latin America in order to be able to organize access of children that were in rural areas so they can access to skill. So now we have thousands of children that cannot access to education even in urban areas. Migrants and refugees are a more vulnerable group in these circumstances. According to official data from Migración Colombia, 1,700,000 people from Venezuela are in Colombia, and 24% are children and adolescents. The first needs that have been identified are in 85%. It's food, lodging, and there are people who live day by day what they can earn every day to provide food and shelter for one day. So they cannot guarantee access to education for their children in the long term. So in Colombia, we wanted to ensure this population so they can access to the benefits of the government of Colombia. The temporary statute is going to help in that. However, there is much more to do, and that is how you can help, because you are our partners, our allies, and our donors. Our actions have been really important because despite the pandemic, ECW in Colombia and our colleagues of the United Nations, we have worked to be able to offer distant learning throughout the country. How? With the help of the Ministry of the National Education, because they believed that we all could receive the help of ECW, and what we brought was to put into place the experiences that we already have been implemented in Colombia, and we responded to be able to bring this access to education in every region. And the same action we are going to propose for Peru and Ecuador. Working together is the only way to get results. In the current context, in Colombia, they have made a lot of efforts to guarantee the access to education, but they also the access to health, to have a dignifying life. And in the case of Save the Children and its partners, to get the participation of boys and girls that are the most vulnerable. There has been the implementation of a protection plan for migrants from Venezuela, and we are working on helping them participate actively in the implementation that will be done for the inclusion of their families and communities. There has been a lot of work that has been done in order to include these migrants into the communities. These extraordinary measures mean that we have to face technical, political, and financial challenges, which are There's a gap, and you already know. There's a gap which is $70.5 million that we are lacking in order to be able to implement all the projects that we would like to. And the problem that we are having is that we cannot reach all the population because we only can help a small percentage of people. It is essential to inform this gap, to be able to respond to the needs, because there are many children that will not be able to access to education in Latin America, in the region. We are still working on the pandemic, on the access to vaccines, and we really would like to tell you that we depend on you, our donors, so we can implement projects to reach every boy and girl in the region and guarantee that they have access to education. Zainab, hello. Let me thank, in the name of Education Cannot Wait, the organizers of this event. It is a pleasure for me to share this space with the authorities and with the Ministry of Education from Colombia, the diplomatic community, Canada, Norway, UNICEF, Save the Children, the coordinator of Trinidad and Tobago, and the agencies of the United Nations system, the civil society, the executive secretariat of the Convenio Andrés Bello, and the representative of the communities here. Let me continue in English.
Listening to the excellent interventions of the panelists that preceded me today. Their reflections have been insightful and well contributed to our shared objective of ensuring the right to education for refugees and migrants from Venezuela. It has come out very starkly that the challenges in the region, such as access, retention, la permanencia, digital learning during COVID to ensure continued learning, WASH facilities, psychosocial support, the need to implement the equivalencies table are all associated with the integration of children, adolescents, young refugees and migrants in the education system in the region. The integration means providing some sort of normalcy for a child and the parents, despite the trauma and the displacement they experienced and continue to experience. So we are also aware of the opportunities inherent of the recognition in the region of the importance of education as a fundamental human right, conducive to the realization of all other rights. And today's discussion, in tone and in substance, is witness of the fact that we aim to advance inclusive and quality education for migrants, refugees, and host communities alike. As many of you know, ECW is a global fund that was established in 2016 at the World Humanitarian Summit, where under the leadership of the Secretary General of the United Nations, donor countries, and humanitarian and development actors committed to the so-called Grand Bargain. It was established to ensure that education is placed at the center of humanitarian responses to ensure greater collaboration and coordination between humanitarian and development actors and ensure responses that address both immediate and long-term education needs are met. It focuses on the need to ensure inclusive and quality education accessible to children and adolescents affected by crises, conflict, and emergencies. It is within this framework that ECW is now providing support to Venezuelan refugees and migrant children and adolescents. As their excellencies from Canada and Norway mentioned, ECW has provided support to the Latin American and Caribbean region through its first response window, adopting a regional approach to countries affected by the Venezuelan crisis. The first response responded to the needs in Brazil, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela. Subsequently, 3 most affected countries have since been supported with multi-year resilience programs, also with a regional multi-year program, with the regional approach. And these countries are Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru. The Regional Education Group plays a key role in ensuring education support to the ECW multi-year programs at the country level, and that they are aligned with the Regional Refugee and Migrant Response Plan and its national platforms. ECW's investment in the region is sizable. It totals 14 million for the FERS and 28.5 million for the current multi-year programs that are targeting around 320,000 children and adolescents. These programs are targeted at the pre-primary, primary, and secondary levels. The interventions are focused on addressing those key areas that have been mentioned today, and which are education, the right to education, retention, quality of education and learning, mental health and psychosocial support and protection. The regional multi-year program, as was mentioned, focuses on supporting the country's efforts in strengthening policies and improving data and evidence to improve those responses, working with the Secretaría del Convenio Andrés Bello on implementing equivalencies and exchanging best practices and supporting resource mobilization efforts. Now, this brings me to the issue of resourcing. The funding gap is significant at around, as was said, 400 million. In the case of the ECW programs, there is a gap of 116 million, and these were developed under the guidance of the ministries of education of all the countries. So I seize this opportunity to make an appeal to fill the funding gap for these needed education programs that aim to ensure the right to education for displaced children and adolescents. I would also like to highlight the historical decision recently taken by the Colombian government to guarantee the protection status of Venezuelan refugees and migrants. This, we believe, will provide them access to further the migrants and refugees to access to basic services, including education, even without documents, for those also without documents. So the gap for the Colombia program today stands, as Maria Paula before me has mentioned, at 70.5 million. Bridging this funding gap would send the message, we believe, that such policy decisions are rewarded and supported by the international community, including ECW, particularly in view of the sizable needs registered in the country. Therefore, more funding will enable scale-up of programs to reach all vulnerable displaced children and host communities. And with that, I'd just like to end by saying muchas gracias por vuestra gentil atención. Quisiera
I would like to Thank you for attending. I would like to highlight the engagement of Education Cannot Wait in helping you and working you in partnership. Thank you very much. And I'll leave the floor to Susana. Thank you very much, Maria Paula y Zainab. This is the end of this important meeting. As Victoria told at the beginning, we are talking about funding gaps of more than 70 million for the regional program. We need more than 80 million, and we are not counting here the needs of Peru and Ecuador or other countries in the Caribbean. We have highlighted the role of inclusive and quality education for the good of the life of boys, girls, and adolescents. The educational sector is a fundamental right, but it is the way to help children access to other fundamental rights. The educational sector is really important to let children participate in their own solution. And that has been highlighted by Oriana during her participation. I would like to thank every one of you who have stayed here during this event, participating in the reflections, and all our panelists that have been participating. All our partners, we would like to thank you. And we would like to repeat our key message: education saves lives. We look forward to your support for 2021 and more. Thank you very much.